video 2 for class number 1. Hope that's not too confusing. So we are talking about the Pequot Massacre. We're gonna continue with the discussion where roughly around 1630, 1631, the Pequots have basically established a monopoly among the neighboring tribes. They have worked so closely with the Dutch, and the Dutch have provided them, like I said in the previous video, useful tools, things that they can use versus like English weapons, right? They have no desire for that. So the tools that the Dutch provide allow the Pequots to continue to produce their currency, which is called wampum. And in so doing, like I said, they've established control among neighboring tribes. So they basically have the ability to be selective with who they trade with, what they give to neighboring tribes. They're kind of in charge, which has greatly angered the neighboring tribes. It has angered them so much so that I find this like truly baffling that the Narragansetts and the Algonquins reached out to the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Plymouth Bay Colony in hopes of establishing a military alliance against the Pequots. They have come to the English settlers, who they don't particularly love, to say, hey, we're really not digging what's going on with the Pequots. Let's see what we can do. Basically a coup, right? To uproot them and their dominance because we're not here for it. Which I think is just incredible. This is 1631. So this is kind of the beginning of the end for the Pequots. So throughout the next 6 years, there's a multitude of conflict that exists. The biggest one that I'll mention is in 1633, 2 English captains were murdered. So it is unknown who murdered them. And this is eerily reminiscent, for me anyway, and we will discuss this in a further lecture, of the burning of the Reichstag, which happened in Nazi-occupied Germany. So it's unclear who murdered these 2 English captains, but boy, was this the spark. So again, 1633, it was English Captain John Stone and another traitor, John Oldham. It's unclear which tribe did it. The English and the Dutch both blamed the Pequots. There were rumors that something of the Pequots were left behind, which is why they blamed them. But really, I believe, and history doesn't necessarily support this assertion, but I think when we look at the events that happen just a few years later, that it's pretty clear neighboring tribes most likely orchestrated this to happen as justification for what is going to occur next. So they retaliated, they murdered a Pequot individual, and then the Pequots retaliated again. So basically, it's how natives functioned, at least these North American natives, it was kind of the eye for an eye policy. You take out one of our leaders, we're going to take out one of yours, and then we're going to call it even. It didn't always result in full-out conflict and war. However, to the English, this was it. So 1636, there's more attacks, these mini acts of aggression towards one another. And it really comes to a head that the Puritans in particular believe that they need to rid their colony of this Pequot evil, that they are not like the other neighboring tribes, the Narragansetts, the Mohegans, the Algonquins, because they're the ones that are acting violently, like thus convincing them or I guess confirming their belief system that these natives are savages, that these natives are incapable of being cultured, that they're not like them. Othering, right? So what happens, the English officially declare war May 1st, 1637. they work with the Mohegans and the Narragansetts specifically, and they basically plot and plan this surprise attack, this coup, while the Pequot tribes are sleeping. They were living within a fenced out area. This is where they were sleeping. It is estimated anywhere between 400 and 700 Pequots were in this smaller encampment on the evening of May 25th. So dawn, May 26th, the colonists, along with their native allies, set fire to the Pequot encampment, and as the Pequots are starting to raise the alarm, they just start taking them down one by one. Men, women, children, elders, all of them. Like I said, it's estimated at between 400 and 700 Pequots were there. All but a handful were murdered. And the remaining survivors were either killed on sight if they managed to escape, they were given to those native allies as slaves, or they were shipped off to the Caribbean as slaves to work on sugar plantations. So the entire Pequot population was all but destroyed. The Hartford Treaty in September of 1637 among the colonies, the Pequots were officially outlawed and their name was banned forever. So they essentially were eradicated because they crossed the line. They were becoming too powerful. They were becoming too much of a force for neighboring tribes and colonists alike to be okay with their dominance. Little did the Mohegans and the Narragansetts know that the colonists would then later turn on them as well. Not in as big of an act of violence, but in these smaller ways where they continued to grab land. They would force themselves upon their women. And basically take away the parts of them that made them native. That is cultural genocide, and I will talk about that in further lectures. So this is a huge act of genocide amongst one particular tribe. And like I said, this is not discussed in our textbooks. This is not something most people are aware of, and this happened so early on, 1637. The Plymouth colony had been there for less than 2 decades. So it's an ugly precedent that has now been established. Again, this English white settler mentality that believes they are superior, that they are doing the work of God to rid this new world of its evil, of the indigenous population that had been there well before these colonists decided to take root there. So this is the end of our very first class. Please let me know what questions you have in the comments. Your homework assignment, like I said, is to learn what the Commonwealth of Nations is, how many nations are part of it, and I would love for you to comment with one nation in particular that you discover, and if you could let me know when the English asserted their rule or their control over that particular nation. Because I think that is an interesting area to discuss. So, again, any questions, leave them in the comments. Any feedback you have, I obviously am open to it. Our next class, we're going to discuss Australia, and particularly the Tasmanian Aboriginal population. So, see you next class.